Hello gorgeous peeps, I'm Chris from TechSpert, and today we're going to be unboxing and fully testing out one of the very first big gaming smartphones to launch in 2020, the Black Shark 3. You can actually pre-order the Black Shark 3 right now from Black Shark, which is Xiaomi's gaming smartphone subsidiary. It's available from the end of May here in the UK, and bizarrely we only have the price on the most expensive model, the 12GB 256 storage model, which will cost 649 quid. Hopefully the cheapest model of the Black Shark 3 will cost around the 549 price point. So I'm going to do the usual full unboxing, take you on a tour of all of the hardware and the software here on the Black Shark 3, and as you can see here we've also got a bunch of accessories which you can purchase for the phone actually right now from the Black Shark website. I'm going to be testing those out with a good bit of PubG action and see how it all holds up. So first up, love the bit of box artwork as you open it on up. There's definitely a Black Shark, quite a vicious looking bugger as well. There's your actual Black Shark 3 itself. Just going to chuck that aside while we check out what's in the rest of the box. Got some of the specs and features on there. The dual battery hypercharge in particular is very interesting, and for that hypercharge tech to work you will need this super beefy adapter. It's definitely right up there with the likes of the Oppo Dot Charge adapter in terms of sheer bulk. That is an impressive beast indeed. 65 watt charging though, thanks to the dual battery design, so it should take less than 40 minutes at the plug for the Black Shark 3 to be fully charged up. And probably no prizes for correctly guessing what is in this little bit of box action. Yeah, it's a cable. And inside that secondary box with a funky logo, I'm guessing you get a protective cover. Yes indeed, great to see. Certainly quite a funky effort as far as protective covers go. Some large gaping holes there, but that's a necessity out of the design, unfortunately. And you also get some Black Shark stickers. Lovely. So not a bad bundle at all overall. Let's just prize the Black Shark 3 on out, and this is definitely a seriously hefty beast. It's good to see Black Shark sticking with that very distinctive design work here on the back. What you get is mostly glass with a little bit of aluminium framing on there as well, just these little bands here and also around the edges. As you can see there, quite a contoured finish here on the back, and as if it wasn't already immediately apparent that this is a gaming smartphone, you also get a bit of RGB action in that Black Shark logo around back as well. And you can apparently grab the Black Shark 3 in the rather vibrant hues of black, grey or silver, but of course the RGB light on the back there should make up for the lack of exciting rainbow hues. And if you were wondering what the Black Shark 3 looks like with that protective cover slapped on top of it, well, it looks an awful lot like this. Alright, so hopefully we've got some juice in that battery already. We do indeed. So I'm going to get it all set up now and get a bit of PubG installed, and then we'll take a proper full-on tour of all the gaming features and check out those accessories. Okay, so we are ready to rock with the Black Shark 3. It's all set up. The software has been fully updated. So let's crack on. We'll have a bit of a tour of some of the hardware first before we dive into those gaming features. So first of all, what you get here on the standard model of the Black Shark 3 is a 6.67-inch Full HD Plus AMOLED panel. Unsurprisingly for a gaming smartphone, as you can see there, it's a completely flat display. You don't get any curved edges or anything like that, which can sometimes balk the responsiveness when you are playing a mobile game. Fairly chunky bezels surrounding that display as well, so certainly not one of the most attractive smartphone finishes, but then gaming smartphones do tend to have the slightly thicker bezels. And you do actually get a pre-installed screen protector on there as well, which you can hopefully just about make out. You've got full HDR10 Plus support, so nice sharp contrast and accurate colours as well. You've got a just noticeable colour difference of 0.55, so it's almost as strong for accurate colour reproduction as the OnePlus 8 and the OnePlus 8 Pro. If you dive on into the Black Shark 3's display settings, you've got so much you can play around with. You can choose to have the colours more vivid or a bit more natural. You can play around with the temperature, of course. Mess around with the likes of the dark mode. You've got display enhancement tools, video HDR mode, super cinema mode, and of course most gaming smartphones and even just standard premium smartphones these days come with a minimum 90Hz refresh rate display as well. A couple like the ROG 2 come with 120Hz support, but 90Hz absolutely fine for a silky smooth experience, and not that many games actually support over 60 right now anyway. Sadly, the Black Shark 3 can't actually automatically change up the refresh rate depending on what you're doing, what app you're playing with and so on, so you'll have to either stick it on 90Hz and leave it on there, or else bump it down to 60 if you want to preserve your battery life. And it's a full stereo speaker setup as well, both front firing speakers as well, so as you'd kind of hope from a gaming smartphone, give you that surround sound stereo effect. The level of customization here on the Black Shark 3 is certainly very impressive indeed, and that all comes courtesy of the Joy UI 11 launcher, which is delicately smushed on top of Android 10, just adding whole heaps of extra features, including of course lots of gaming loveliness. And of course, one of the features that you can play around with is that LED light on the back there. It's quite subtle as far as some gaming smartphone LEDs are concerned, and you can change this up in the light effect settings right here, so you can enable or disable it if you don't want it to turn on, if you want to just save your battery life instead. And of course, you've got the full range of effects. You can change up the color and everything as well, so you can basically get it doing whatever you fancy. And you can change up exactly what that LED does as well whenever you get incoming notifications, calls, all that kind of shenanigans, whether the screen is on or off. And you can also get a bit of a disco effect as well when you're playing your media. Great stuff. And when it's time to jump into a bit of gaming action, what you want to do is just bump this little slider button here on the right edge. Just slip that across and you'll go into Shark Space. Now this is Black Shark's gaming UI, basically, where you get fast access to all of your installed games and also a lot of those tasty gaming features. So not only can you quick start one of your games, but you can also quickly hook up one of your Black Shark accessories that you might have purchased. And if you dive on into the settings as well, you've got a whole bunch of features in here, such as, for instance, a bit of call rejection. And if you dive on into the Gamer Studio as well, you can set up an individual configuration for each of your games that you've got installed as well. So you can give it a bit of a performance boost if needed, all the way up to good old ludicrous modes, how we love it. I'm going to leave that one on for PUBG for my testing just to see how it performs. You can play around with the display output, the touch controls, audio output, all kinds of stuff. And great news for fans of connected games like PUBG Mobile and Fortnite, because you've got full network preferences in here as well. So for instance, you can prioritize certain networks depending on how strong the connection is. You can limit the amount of background traffic that you get as well, so your game gets priority. Okay, so we're all configured, and now it's time to test out a bit of PUBG Mobile here on the Black Shark 3. So like all of the most premium smartphones right now, gaming or otherwise, you get a Snapdragon 865 chipset packed inside the Black Shark 3, backed by either 8 or 12 gigs of DDR5 RAM. This review model right here is the 8 gig base model. And I found that with the Black Shark 3 locked into that ludicrous mode, that PUBG Mobile stayed at a fairly consistent 60 frames per second on that top end extreme frame rate mode. Occasionally it would dip down to around the sort of 55 frames per second area, but for the most part it held pretty consistently around that 59-60 FPS level. And to keep the Black Shark 3 cool, you've got what is known as a sandwich structure cooling system. Basically, you get coolant pipes housed on both sides of the board to whisk away that pesky hot air. I did find after about sort of 15-20 minutes of gameplay that the back end did get a little bit toasty. It was quite warm to the touch, but it didn't get beyond that sort of level, and even with a full hour of gameplay, I didn't find any kind of throttling or anything like that going on. If you're a big fan of basically playing PUBG Mobile for 10 hours straight every day, you can grab yourself the Black Shark 3 Fun Cooler, which is basically a massive fan that straps onto the back end. The Fun Cooler doesn't have much extra weight to the Black Shark 3, but it certainly adds a bit of extra bulk, and you'll need to have it constantly plugged in via Type-C USB in order to actually get it whirring. Once it gets going, it's quite noisy as well, though it does add a funky extra bit of a light and disco effect to your gaming session, so there's always that. To be frank though, I never found the Black Shark 3 heated up to the sort of degree where you would require an extra massive bolt-on fan in order to help keep it cool. As for the battery, well, it's a 4720 milliamp cell stuffed inside the Black Shark 3. Not one of the biggest around, certainly for a gaming smartphone. The likes of the ROG Phone 2 boast much bigger batteries, but I still found I got around 5 full hours of constant playtime from a full charge using that ludicrous mode setting as well. And the good news is when you are completely wiped out, that 65 watt wired charging will power you back up to full in under 40 minutes as long as you use the bundled charger. Now if you need to actually charge up the Black Shark 3 while you're gaming, it can be kind of awkward because that USB cable needs to slot in exactly where your hand usually fits. So what you might want to do is invest in the Black Shark magnet charging cable instead. This just slaps over the docking port on the back of the Black Shark 3 and it holds reasonably firm thanks to the magnetic connection, although you will want to make sure you don't accidentally nudge it with your fingers while you're gaming, as it will probably fall off. And also that cable is woefully short at around 1 meter in length, so you'll have to be pretty damn close to the mains while you use it. Absolutely no worries with the screen responsiveness either. You've got a 270Hz touch response rate here on the Black Shark 3 display, and it really shows. Every single little swipe, poke, prod, instantaneous reaction from the smartphone. The multi-touch capabilities are fantastic as well. Definitely had no problem running, turning, gunning all at the same time. Very smooth and slick. If you're not a fan of those on-screen touch controls, you can buy the Gamepad 3 for the Black Shark 3, which adds proper physical tactile buttons and a thumbstick as well. Great stuff. Unfortunately, I can't actually test out the Gamepad 3 because I don't have the rigid plastic bumper which you then slip onto the Black Shark 3 in order to connect the gamepad. Boo. And when you're actually balls deep in a game of PUBG Mobile or whatever on the Black Shark 3, you can pull out the gaming control center just by swiping inwards from either the top left or the top right corner of that Black Shark 3 display. This offers up all the usual great gaming features that you would kind of expect from something like the Black Shark 3, like notifications, killing, the Shark Time feature to actually record your gameplay for posterity purposes. You've even got a monitoring tool there if you want to check out the frame rate on the fly. And as usual, you get the Black Shark Master Control mode on there as well. What this allows you to do is basically force press on either the left or the right side of the screen in order to perform a certain function. So for instance, I had it whenever I force pressed on the left side of the screen, that would bring up my scope in PubG Mobile, and it worked really, really well. Occasionally I did find myself accidentally doing that when I was surprised by somebody popping out in front of me, for instance, but then it usually worked quite well because then I could zoom straight in on their head and blow their bloody brains out. So overall, I enjoyed my PubG Mobile experience here on the Black Shark 3. Definitely that super responsive screen was one of the highlights. Perfect performance pretty much throughout, and respectable battery life as well. It's a shame you don't get proper haptic triggers on here or anything. You do of course get proper push triggers on the Pro model, so I'm really looking forward to trying that one out. As for the rest of the specs here on the standard Black Shark 3, where you get 5G support in there and a bit of Wi-Fi 6 as well, so certainly no issues for connectivity for the foreseeable. If we dive into the settings as well, go to the storage. It's UFS 3.0 again, of course, as you would expect from a gaming smartphone. You get a choice of either 128 or 256 gigs of storage space. I've got the base model, so that's 128. No micro SD support, unfortunately, if you do want to expand. As for the camera tech, well, around back you get a 64 megapixel primary lens, f1.8 aperture, backed by a 13 megapixel ultra-wide angle lens and a 5 megapixel depth sensor. And certainly the Black Shark 3's camera app will look very familiar indeed to anyone who's used a Xiaomi smartphone before, getting some serious deja vu. Absolutely feature packed. You've got the likes of the AI scene recognition mode, good old HDR of course, let's just stick that on auto. You've got your portrait mode using that depth sensor to add a nice bokeh style effect. Got a proper dedicated night mode just to help brighten up those low light shots. Your panorama mode, 64 megapixel mode to shoot in the maximum detail because otherwise it uses pixel binning to shoot in 16 megapixel I believe it is. You've got a full pro manual mode as well, so you can actually play around with the likes of the white balance, the ISO levels and so on. If you dive on into the video section, you can shoot up to 4K resolution footage using that. You've also got short video and a slow motion mode as well. And meanwhile, if we flip around to the 20 megapixel front facing camera, there you go, you can shoot yourself a lovely selfie. Looks like it's kind of going slightly crazy with the saturation levels there, but I'm sure it'll do the job in a pinch if you absolutely must. And that right there in a nutshell is the Black Shark 3 gaming smartphone. Not quite as slick or as feature packed as like the Asus ROG Phone 2, which is still my favorite gaming smartphone right now, but it's also better value for money compared with that really pricey ROG Phone. Be very interesting to try out the Pro version, of course. Stay tuned for more on that later with the proper physical trigger buttons and the specs updates as well. Be interested to see how that changes things. If you're into gaming smartphones, then definitely check back later this week where I'm hoping to do the full same PUBG treatment with the Red Magic 5G and then do a full comparison between the Black Shark and the Red Magic as well to see which one might be best for you. Please do subscribe, ding that notifications bell, and have yourselves a lovely week, people. Cheers everyone, love you.